How's it going? Welcome to Sunny Sheets. I'm Carson and we are doing another book chat. This is the second time I'm recording this video because I had a second mic failure. So you live and you don't learn because you make the same mistakes, but it's all good because I love chatting about the books I've read. We're caught up, y'all. This is the most up-to-date Gunmetal Gods book. This is book 4, Dark Drinker by Zamil Akhtar. Just like with book 3, I can't talk anything about the plot because it wouldn't make any sense and it's huge spoilers. So I can, like I did with Elder Epoch, I can at least talk about at a high level what the book did for the series if you're someone who is like interested in reading the series and wondering if it's worth the investment. It is. But let's talk about it. So Dark Drinker, really similar to Conqueror's Blood in the way that book 4 has nothing to do with what happened in book 3. You're given a completely different protagonist and antagonist pair compared to book 3. This takes place in a completely different part of the Gunmetal Gods world, and it features like a separate plot. But it's still setting up things that relate to what happened. And so this is like definitely not like an anthology where it's like you can read book 4 and book 1 and this all is building up towards something. It's just the way that this series chooses to tell its story is like in little bits, in little isolated bits here and there that all will meet up in one common like fight, hoorah, like whatever you want to call it. But overall, this book was phenomenal. This book gives you a very different setting and very different biome and just very different scenery than what we see in book 1, 2, and 3. This book gives some big character development to characters we've met in the series and introduces you to some new important ones. We're in a different part of the world that we haven't explored too much, really much of at all. So this book further enriches the Gunmetal Gods like world as a whole. It really feels lived in. This book is high octane. There's a lot of action in this one. I don't think there was nearly as much political intrigue as like Conqueror's Blood did or Elder Epoch. This one's a bit more straight up action and fighting and such. And that was incredible. We get to see further uses of magic that we know of. We get to see a little bit of new magic, and that horror element just completely continues. There's lots of grotesque imagery and body horror, but this book also does something different where there's a lot of existential horror, and I can't really explain how or why, but a lot more existential uncertainty. Do I know what I know? Or like, is what I know or are my memories true? And like a lot of questioning of yourself. So there's a lot of that kind of horror in this book that was really unnerving. And I think this book seems at the very end of this book is setting up the final antagonist and protagonist pairing. Because every book kind of has a different pairing. Book 1 is different, book 2, book 3, and book 4 all have this different pairing. And I think this book has set up the final one, sort of the final protagonist and the final antagonist, and sort of what the ultimate climax of the whole Gunmetal Gods series is going to be. So overall, if you can't tell by the way I'm speaking, Zamil Akhtar just doesn't miss. The quality of these books just maintains, arguably gets a little bit better, and this was a great addition to the series that fleshed out some characters that didn't need it, but it's very appreciated to have them more fleshed out, and we get to experience and learn more about a culture that we don't or haven't like kind of seen firsthand, and we're in a very different setting and different surroundings than the first 3 books. So this book really enriched the world as a whole. There was badass action, awesome action, powerful emotions, and arguably setting up the finale of the series. So Zamil Akhtar does not miss, y'all. This was, again, a stellar book, incredible. I think Elder Epoch I liked just a hair more, just because there was just Elder Epoch had more setup and was kind of more of this bigger thing in terms of scale. But this book was absolutely incredible. This was a 9 out of 10 for me. 4.5 out of 5 stars if you like the star system. I mean, it was an incredible book, a great addition to the series, and I can't wait for that 5th book to come out. I think so. In the actual back of the book, it says 2025 release for book 5, but Zamil Akhtar in a Reddit comment had said that it probably is going to be summer of 2026. So we have some time before that comes out. This book completely subverted my expectations, because when I finished Elder Epoch and it was basically implied that Micah the Metal was making a return, I really thought it was to be the final antagonist. I really thought him and Keva were going to match off again, and that was going to be like the climax or like the series conclusion. But no, he was actually the protagonist of this book. He was not a moral redemption, because it's really hard to redeem the shit that he did in the first book. Was pretty damn just straight up evil. But he's attempted to have this moral redemption, and he's trying his best to do some good, at least. Micah's whole purpose in this book is simply to get the woman Mara and her daughter, and funny enough, Keva's son, just safe. He's trying to get them to safety and out of the hands of Vasco, because Vasco is just completely despicable. And so, yeah, Micah is just trying. He sees these as just innocent, good people, and his only goal in the whole book is just to get the daughter away from Vasco and to get Mara and Princip to safety. And he has a lot of introspection in this book about how he was basically manipulated by Hawa and the fallen angels, and he has a lot of regret for a lot of the evil that he committed in the first book. And it's really like interesting. He has a lot of these existential questions, because when he drinks the book's called The Dark Drinker. When he drinks the mana, he lives this alternate life of a peaceful Keva. So he lives through the eyes of a different version of Keva that never went to war, that denied the Shah like his support, and just lived a quiet life where he wrote poems and lived with his family. He notes that in this in this separate world, how Vasco, it controls Crucius, how Vasco is still an important person in this world, but Micah's name never once gets mentioned by anyone. So he has these existential questions like, did anything I do really make a difference in this other world? Vasco is still an important person, but I'm not. And did all the things that I did as a conqueror, did they really matter? And he just starts to he lives this peaceful life through Keva, and just kind of starts seeing that the most important thing in one's life, or the thing that can bring the most fulfillment, is living peacefully with your family and trying to live a quiet, happy life. And it kind of furthers his goal to make sure that Mara, Princip, and Anna are just protected and in a safe place. And equally, Micah doesn't know who this random woman is at the start of the book, but she knows her husband was killed by Micah in the first book. So at first she has a lot of contempt for Micah. It's like, I hate this guy. But then she notes that Micah really is trying to just do good and save her and her 2 children, and she starts kind of falling for him and giving him some sympathy and saying that she prays for him and stuff. So that was really sweet. And then Vasco is just an absolute piece of shit. That guy is super despicable. He burned his little girl's face and doesn't have an ounce of sympathy or remorse or care for anyone who's not an immigrant, which is the name that's given to the people who lived alternate lives in the sea mist place with the pyramid. It's all very vague and spooky. Kind of Icard was mentioning this to Keva at the end of Elder Epoch, how he had memories of this other life he lived in this misty place where things didn't make sense. And that's kind of seems to be the ultimate finale of the book, is that the Dark Terror is this event that's going to happen that will crack open this egg that the world comes from or is hidden within the world, that all non-immigrant souls will just turn into this big soul sea, but then the souls of the immigrants will go somewhere else, and that's what Vasco's trying to bring on, whereas Keva doesn't want any of that to happen. He just wants the world to just go on as it is, how it's been going. I don't know what I was trying to say to that point, but Vasco sucks. He's being set up as the final antagonist. And I guess another thing about Vasco that I didn't quite understand is why he was written to be a star rider, but then loses that power so quickly in the book. Like within the first, like less than 100 pages, he has to gouge the eye out whenever he's in the jail and he's going to be questioned by Imperator Josias, because the whole Crucian people don't do any sort of black magic or sorcery. So if they saw his black eye, he'd immediately be imprisoned or executed. So he gouges the eye out. And I guess I'm wondering why he was written to have it. If he so quickly in the book had to get rid of it and then loses those powers. I mean, probably one of two reasons, or like both. But he does use the star seeing eye in the prison and learns and sees Syra and Celine, which I guess was kind of important. And then I guess it also just shows his commitment and just his tenacity, I guess. Because it's like no easy thing, I'd imagine, to take your eye out. So I guess it's like just a way to show that like he means business and he'll do whatever he needs to. But I don't know. I just was like, oh, this is dope. He's a star rider, and then lost it so quickly. So I don't really know what the point of that was. And then going back to Micah, man, his abilities were just badass. I mean, just the term Sun Gorger, being a Sun Gorger, I thought was a super cool name for a set of powers. And all of the stuff that he does with lightning, like he slashes people down with like a fat lightning greatsword. He's smiting people with red lightning from the sky. He's got lightning spears and a lightning whip and these like thin little lightning arrows. And like, he does just all this cool stuff. It was just awesome. No real deeper thing to say. It's just, it was freaking cool. He mentions he used lightning in the first book, but you know what? Now that I'm talking through it, I vaguely remember him pointing out the oil like within his metal arm and doing, I guess he used his magic a little bit in the first book, but it was really on display in this book. So yeah, Michael's fighting was really cool. And yeah, especially that scene where they're fighting the fallen angel. Whenever he first meets Cog and Crumb, and he says, okay, well, you need to go kill the fallen angel before we do anything. And he goes, and that fight was really cool. And that was what kind of introduced that existential horror that I mentioned in the spoiler-free section, because it's spitting out these like green letters that if they touch you or they touch something, it rewrites this fallen angel. It rewrites it kind of randomly. So like a letter hit a tree and it grew an ear or something. Like, it's just real weird stuff. But the letters, when they hit people, it rewrites aspects about them, and not rewrites it within the moment, but as if for all of time it had been that way. And the existential horror really happens to Asperia, who is one of Cogum Crumb's wives. She's in that fight, and she's in the water, and she gets hit with like thousands of those letters. And she kind of looks the same, but everyone's memory just becomes something that was not originally who she was, but it rewrites it as if you've known her that way the whole time. But memories, it's kind of random. It's not streamlined the way things are rewritten. So memories will be completely contradictory, and people are like, well, she's always been that way, but that doesn't make sense to this other memory I have. And like, it introduces this whole idea of like, am I who I really am? And Asperia just has this whole like, I don't even know who I am, because she has memories of being a warrior, and she was, but now she's rewritten and is just kind of this like frail woman who can't fight or do anything. And it's real eerie, just like having your whole memories plucked with in a random way that makes everything contradictory to what you think you know. And yeah, it's real weird, real uneasy. And of course, with Zemil Akhtar, you're getting more of that grotesque imagery and the body horror. The worm rot is just something like that makes me think of like Elden Ring with like the plague, those like plague enemies. Yeah, just more of that, of course, just more of that. And so at the end of Dark Drinker, it seems like they're setting up the final protagonist and antagonist pair, being Keva and Vasco. Because Keva, his whole purpose, really since book 1, was to stop the forces of the fallen angels and to not allow the Great Terror to happen. And I think in book with Micah the Metal and with Syra, they were two people that were willing to use the powers of Hawa, but they didn't want the Great Terror to happen. They just wanted to use these dark powers because it was what made them powerful. But Vasco, actually, that is his goal, to make it happen. So that is kind of implying that he is going to be like the final antagonist against Keva. So that's cool to kind of see the climax of the series kind of being in sight. It's cool to see. And so yeah, with that, we are fully caught up with the Gunmetal God series. So I think at this point, I'm going to take a little bit of a break from reading series, and there are a lot of just different stuff on my bookshelf I really have been wanting to get into. So let me show y'all what I'm reading next. I just barely started Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. This is a super popular book on BookTube, and I've been wanting to read something very liminal and strange and imaginative and just whimsical. And I've read like the first 10 pages of it, and man, it comes out swinging with that liminal weird energy. I absolutely love it. I've only read 10 pages, but I can already tell I love this book. So started Piranesi. And so that's our book chat. If you made it all the way to this point of the video, thanks for hanging with me. If you watch my book chats, you already know what's coming, but if you don't, if this is your first time watching a book chat, I always read a book excerpt from my journal, just something either pretty or cool or awesome, something wise. I don't know, I'm just gonna flip and see what I find here. And he may put you on a throne. Character is subtle. He is dangerous, devious, but I'll not withhold the antidote from him. A sword is dangerous too, character. We have the scabbard for this one though. The poison's in him. When we withdraw the antidote, death will sheath him. Dune, Frank Herbert. Thanks for hanging.